Hello everyone and welcome back to Principles of Game Design. In this module we are going to be importing some of our models over from Maya, as well as adding some simple blueprints to our house to spruce things up. Now to start with, I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and you'll notice that my player start has been moved to the second story of my house. I've gone ahead and added this railing so he can't fall down onto the first floor, as well as this little home office, and this concrete vault. Now let's go ahead and start importing our models. I'm going to go ahead and hit escape, and we need our chair for our little home office. So go ahead and open up your chair project. Here we are, long time no see, and select your chair, and we're going to go ahead and export this over to Unreal. In order to do so, we'll go to File, and about halfway down the drop-down we'll find Export Selection. Once you click that, you'll notice that we have this little window, and there's two things that we need to care about. First off, we're exporting to our C drive, which is bad. That happened because I didn't properly set my project, so I'll go back to File and either set project or hope to find it in my recent projects. Then we'll go back to Export Selection, and now we're in our Project Scenes folder. The other thing to notice is the file type down here at the bottom, which is currently Maya binary. If you export a Maya binary, you're just going to end up with another Maya file, so instead we're going to scroll down all the way to the bottom and find FBX export. You can also choose OBJ, but FBXs allow us to export more information like textures and materials. So with FBX selected, we're going to go ahead and name our file. I'm going to name mine sm_chair. And the reason I'm doing that is static mesh and then chair. Export selection, and I'm going to get a warning. Sometimes this happens. And if we go ahead and click that warning, it says that we can't export an AI wireframe. That's fine because I don't actually want an AI wireframe on my chair. Alright, now that I've gone and exported my chair, I'm going to come back to Unreal, and I'm going to do a little bit of file organizing. I'm going to go ahead and right click, and I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to name it Assets. There we go. Now inside of this Assets folder, I'm going to move all of the other stuff we've imported. So in my case, that is my Fantastic Village, my level prototyping, and my stairs folder. So I'm just going to hold Control to select them all, and then click and drag them into my Assets folder, and choose Move Here. Now that's going to take a bit, so I'm going to let that run. And now that it's done, we can see that it's moved all of the folders in here, but all of the folders are still inside of my Contents folder. Now the reason for this, if I go ahead and open up, let's say, the Stairs folder, you'll notice that it's currently empty. But if I click this little button in the top left of my content browser, right here next to the search bar, and go down to the other filters, I can go ahead and choose this Show Redirectors, and this will show me a bunch of empty files, which say, hey, you moved information from this folder to a different folder. These are here so that the engine knows where you've moved them to. And if I go ahead and click on any of these, it'll take me to that asset. But I don't want those redirectors, so I'm going to come back to my content folder, and I'm going to go ahead and right-click all of these folders, and I'm going to go to Fix Up Redirectors. I click that, and now if I reopen these folders, they are no longer visible. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that for all of these. Fix Up Redirectors, Fix Up Redirectors, and then I'm going to delete the unnecessary folders. Oh, it's saying that there's a bunch of things still referenced in here. Let's see if there's actually assets in here. There are. That's strange. Let's go ahead and properly move our loft office over here. There we go. Fix Up Redirectors. Delete it. There we go. And delete the last folder. Good. And now all of my assets are over here. Ah, it's because I moved the wrong asset. That's alright. These are just building blocks for building levels. That can stay in my assets folder just as well. Alright, so now I have this happy little assets folder. I'm also going to go ahead and right click, make a new folder, and name it My Imports. And I've accidentally added in a space. Let's go ahead and undo that and use an underscore. My imports. Good. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn off my filter so that I get rid of that little menu on the side. And inside of this My Imports folder, I'm going to go find my asset and drag it in. So pop open your project folder in your File Explorer, go down to your SM Chair FBX, and simply drag it in to Unreal. And you'll get this FBX import options. Now if you look through here, we've got a couple of settings. We've got our import translation and rotation in case you need to make manual adjustments. It'll also tell you down at the bottom that this is coming from Maya. That means that it'll fix the little mess up where we have the Z in the upper axis in Unreal, but Y in the upper axis in Maya. It'll adjust for that. So we can simply click Import All, close this window, and now we have our SM chair. And we can drag in the chair we made from Maya into our level and position it around our home office. And let's go ahead and move these chairs into position. They're a little short, but we've got plenty of legroom underneath. So this is perfectly fine. Now you'll notice that our chairs aren't smoothed in Unreal. And in fact, that was that little pop-up window that I closed that said there weren't any smoothing groups. That's because FBXs don't care about our smooth preview. If we want to have that smooth effect, we need to go back to Maya, and instead of having our chair in smooth preview before we export it, we actually need to go to Mesh and Smooth. If you do this, you will get a bunch of subdivisions on your chair, and now it's generally smooth without being in preview, and you can go ahead and export this high fidelity version over into Unreal instead. But for our purposes, I'm just going to leave these chairs here, and we're going to move on to our chest. So we now have chairs there. Let's go ahead and import our chest that we can put inside of our vault. So go ahead and one more time, go back to Maya, open up your chest project. And this time, instead of selecting the chest individually, because we have our group, we're going to make sure that we are selecting the chest grouping in our hierarchy. Then one more time, we're going to double check that our project is set correctly. Go to File and Export Selection. And we're going to name this SM_chest. And again, it's trying to export a Maya binary, so scroll down, fix that, FBX export, and export selection. Give that a little second. And then if we come back to our Maya scenes, we have our new SM chest. Let's go ahead and pop back over to Unreal. And we're going to import in our SM chest. Now when I do this, we're going to go ahead and click Import All again. And we're going to see that it has separated the chest out into each individual piece. That's because our chest was not combined. If we come back to Maya, we have all of the individual pieces, all of the spheres, all of the screws as individual pieces. If we wanted to fix that, let's come back to Unreal and delete all of these mesh pieces. We want to minimize how many objects we are importing. So we're going to go ahead and select our top, which contains all of these pieces. We're going to go ahead and combine those, mesh combine. And now we have this object, which is our lid. Let's go ahead and rename this chest_lid. Then we want our base. We're going to go ahead and that's fine. We want to select our bottom as well as our hinges. Let's go ahead and combine those, mesh combine. Let's go ahead and rename that chest_base. There we go, got there eventually. So now I have our base and our lid. Did we miss anything? I don't believe so, because we even select our hinges. So we're just going to export these two now. So we're going to go ahead and select both of them, hold Shift, File, Export Selection, and instead of SM chest, this will be SM_chest, combined. So I'm going to add a C at the end. Export selection. Come back to Unreal. And this time we're going to drag in our C. There we go. Import all. And here are our two pieces of mesh. Now, if we select them both and drag them in at the same time, we get our happy little chest. Let's go ahead and scale that up so it's a bit bigger. Woo. And we don't currently have our textures on them, and we still don't have those smoothing groups. That's perfectly fine. Now I'm going to go ahead and rebuild my material from module 3. So let's go ahead and make a new material. And I'm going to name this m_chest. And then if we come back to our Maya folder, our Maya project, we can go into our source images folder and find all of those chest textures that we use to apply to our chest. So we're going to go ahead and select our chest color and metal and roughness, and we're going to drag them in here. And then we're going to go ahead and apply those to our chest material. So pop that open, and we'll drag in our three textures. Let's see if we can just adjust the windows. There we go. Roughness, color, metal. Drag those in. Color, roughness, metallic. Save and apply. And then chuck that texture onto our chest. There we go. And once we've done that, we can delete the other material that came with it. Perfect. So now we have our chest built, but the pieces are still individual. If we wanted our pieces to stay combined, we could, much like we did with our kitchen, Ctrl-G to group them. But the problem with a group is that once they are grouped, in order to ungroup them, you have to right-click and go to Ungroup, and they're very difficult to work with. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to make a blueprint out of our chest. So we're going to go ahead and right-click here, make a new blueprint class inside of our My Imports folder, and that pops up this window that allows us to choose our type of blueprint. So let's go ahead and run through some of these. Actors are any object that is in the scene or in the level. Pawns are a special type of actor that are designed to receive input from a controller. Characters are a special type of pawn that have movement components, so easy motion, and they're usually used for NPCs, AI, or the player character. The player controller is where you choose what type of input your player can receive, input from a controller, mouse, etc. The game mode base defines whether the game mode is a first person, third person, that sort of thing, and the actor and scene components are things that help us define other pieces of actors inside of the other blueprints. For our purposes, this chest doesn't need to move, so it is just an actor. So I will choose actor, and I will name this BP for blueprint. Oh, let that autosave. Let's go ahead and rename this. BP_chest. Pop that open. And that opens up the blueprint window, which looks like this. Let's go ahead and full screen it and talk about our blueprint window. So first off, we have this viewport where we're going to be adding stuff to our blueprint. We also have our components over here on the left, which functions like our outliner, as well as this My Blueprint section, which contains a bunch of information about our object. In particular, down here we can create variables, which are used by complex blueprints to keep a lot of information straight. The simple types of variable are Boolean, which are true and false, integers, which are any whole number, floats, which are any decimal number, names, strings, and text all contain text, vectors are a collection of numbers for x, y, and z, rotators, same thing, but specifically for rotation, and then transform, which contains all of those informations for location, rotation, and scale. Let's go ahead and delete that. Over here on the right, we have our details panel, which is very similar to the details panel we have in the main window. We also have two additional tabs, the construction script and event graph, where we can add code to our object. We're going to be talking about those in a bit. Let's come back to our viewport for now, hit Control Space to open up our content browser, and let's go find our chest. Assets my import, select both pieces of my chest, and drag those in. Here's our chest, and we need to reapply our material to those pieces, so we're going to go ahead and drag that in as well. Now we have our chest blueprint, compile and save it. Let's come back to our level. We're going to go ahead and delete these two pieces, and simply drag in our chest blueprint, and scale it back up. There we go. And unlike groups, you'll notice down here in the Details panel, we have our individual pieces. We can select those pieces and move them around individually, or we can select our chest blueprint and move them around together. Now that we have our chest blueprint, let's go ahead and rotate it around 90 degrees, and we'll put it inside our vault. Hooray. Let's go ahead and line it up a little bit more to the center of the door. There we go. So we have a chest inside of our gloomy dark vault. Let's go ahead and add a light in here. So we're going to go over to content. Let's go ahead and go to our starter content. We'll go to props, and I'm going to drag in a ceiling light. Now you'll notice that I'm not using a ceiling light blueprint as I used before. Instead, I'm going to be creating my own. So here is my light. I want to line it up to the ceiling. Let's go ahead and pop open my quad view. Hit F over here. There we go. Let's drag it up to the ceiling. Whoop. There we go. And I want to position it over my chest so that I can create some dramatic lighting above it. Wonderful. Then I'm going to go ahead and add a spotlight. So let's go to our Place Actors panel, go to Lights, drag in a spotlight, angle it down, and we're going to go ahead and one more time make sure that it's lined up underneath our lamp. There we go. And we're going to make sure that it is at the right height. Perfect. And then I want to, let's shift a little bit to the right. There we go. Get it nice and centered. Same thing with our lamp. Move that up a little bit. There we go. And now I want to adjust my light so that it's very focused on my chest. Let's go ahead and come over to my Details panel, and let's see if I can make the radius a little smaller. Ooh, not the attenuation radius, the cone angle. Bring that in, and let's increase the inner cone so that there's a little bit of a highlight around the chest. There we go. Now once I have this spotlight lined up where I'd like it, I'd like to turn it on and off whenever the player goes into my vault. So I'm going to go to this green Add button here, and I'm going to look for Box. And I'm going to choose a box collision. And that's going to give me this little square. I'm going to make sure that I have it selected, and I'm going to drag it down to the floor, drag it over here in front of the door, scale it up a bit, and let's bring that inside ever so slightly. And this is going to be the trigger box that turns my light on and off. I'd actually like it to cover this whole room just so that the light doesn't accidentally turn off. So let's go ahead and make it nice and big. Let's refer to my top view real quick. Make it fill up this room. There we go. And then we also need to make sure that it's not clipping underground into the first floor. So we're going to make it a little shorter. There we go. And now we have this trigger box that fills up our vault. Good. Now all we need to do is add some code. And in order to do that, I'm going to click this little C shape that is made out of these boxes, which convert this actor, our box, and our spotlight into a blueprint. So before I click that, I'm going to go back to my content folder, go to Assets, My Imports, click this little C button, and that's going to give me a new blueprint inside of my Imports folder. I'm going to name it BP_Spotlight. and then I'm just going to click select, and I have this new blueprint. And if we go ahead and open that up, oh, you'll notice that we have this red X. Let's change our light to static, but let's go ahead and do that in our blueprint. So we've got our light, we've got our trigger box. Don't worry about them being sideways, because remember we rotated our spotlight 90 degrees. Instead, let's come to our spotlight component and set it to static, compile, save, and that should get rid of that little red X. Good. Now what we want to do is we want to add some code so that when the player enters this box, the light turns on and off. To start with, I'm going to select my spotlight component, scroll down here, and I'm going to make it hidden in-game by default. Click that on, compile, and save. Now you'll notice that the spotlight is still visible here, but if I click play, I've got my little character, and I can look in here, and it is currently off. That's because the light, again, is hidden in-game. Now we want the character to turn the light on whenever it enters the zone, and for that we need to go into our event graph. Now the event graph functions very similarly to our material editor, where we can hold right-click to pan around and use our mouse wheel to scroll. Same thing applies here. And what we're going to do is we're going to use some of these event nodes to cause things to happen. Now we have two default events here. We've got event begin play, which is anything that happens when the game starts, and this event tick, which is anything that happens every tick or every frame of the game. We don't care about either of them, so I'm going to go ahead and select them and delete them. Now we've got our box instead. Remember, we want our character to turn the light on when it enters the room, so I'm going to select my box component, and I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to go to add event. And we want to look for onComponent begin and onComponent end overlap. So these two events will trigger whenever something enters or leaves the box. Whenever something enters the box, our begin node, we want to turn our light on. So I'm going to select my spotlight component. I'm going to go ahead and drag that in here, and I'm going to type in hidden. And we want to set our hidden in game to false, because remember we set it to true previously to hide it. So all we have to do is hook up this, and then same thing on the bottom. Whenever something leaves our box, we want to make it hidden again. Now we will compile and save. Let's go ahead and hit play. And if we walk into our box, the light turns on, and if we leave, the light turns off. And that's an example of a very simple blueprint. Now let's go ahead and add a few more to make our level just a bit more interesting. I'm going to come over to my chest, and I'm going to go ahead and add another box component. So we're going to go to add a box, and this box is going to be used to open up our chest. We're going to go ahead and scale it down a little bit. Let's see how that looks inside of our main level. We now have this box around our chest. Maybe make it a little smaller. Move it back a bit. There we go. So now, if we move up to our chest, let's make something happen. One more time, we're going to go to our event graph. We're going to delete the beginning events. And we're going to right-click our box. And we're going to add an event on component begin overlap. And one more time on component end overlap. Now this time what I want to do is I want to open up my chest. So let's go back to our viewport, let's select our lid, and let's try rotating my lid open. Oh dear, you can see that the pivot of my lid is down here at the bottom. Now I want to rotate my lid somewhere else. I want to rotate it along the hinges, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little sphere. Let's go ahead and add a sphere. Sphere collision, and I'm going to scale this sphere down quite a bit. And I'm going to move this sphere up into my default route by clicking and dragging, and I'm going to make sure that I choose attach. Then I want to adjust all of these numbers There we go, so that it's facing the correct directions. And now I'm going to line up that sphere over to the back of my chest. Remember that if your camera's moving too fast, you can always adjust your camera speed. So let's go ahead and move the sphere over to the back of my chest. Very good. And now that I've done that, I want to move my lid into my sphere. So click my lid, drag it into my sphere, and now if I rotate my sphere, let's go ahead and rotate that, we rotate our lid based on the correct pivot. So this sphere will function as where we're rotating the lid of our chest along. Let's come back to our event graph. And whenever we enter the box, we want to rotate our sphere. So we're going to go ahead and right click and add a timeline. So we're going to right click, type in timeline, and we're going to go to add timeline. Now the timeline controls how much the sphere is going to rotate and when. So I'm going to go ahead and pop open my timeline by double clicking it. And that's going to take me to this timeline tab. And I'm going to click this add track button, and I'm going to choose a float track. Now in here, I'm going to name this track rotate. And all we're going to do is add in a couple of keyframes in this timeline to define when the sphere rotates. To start with, I'm going to lower my length to about 2 seconds. Well, maybe 1.5. Then we're going to right click and we're going to add 2 keys. 1, 2. I'm going to select the first key. I'm going to choose time 0 and value 0. Then I'm going to come over to the second node. I'm going to choose time 1.5, the end of my timeline, and I want to rotate the lid, let's call it 120 degrees. Then if I click these 2 buttons, it'll adjust the timeline, so we're going from 0 to 120 in 1.5 seconds. Let's come back to the event graph. And we just need to plug in our event begin overlap into our timeline. Play. Then we've got our rotate. We want to apply that to our sphere, so I'm going to drag my sphere in. And I'm going to go to set rotation. Let's go ahead and set rotation. We're going to go ahead and click this update. Plug that in here. Whoop. There we go. And then we need to right-click this new rotation, split it, and we want to add this rotation to the correct angle. So let's go ahead and choose our sphere and figure out which direction we're rotating. We're rotating along the x-axis, so we'll come back to our event graph and plug our rotation into the x-axis. Compile and save. Let's see if it works. We'll hit play. We'll walk into the vault. The light turns on. We'll walk up to the chest, and oh dear, it has rotated in an interesting way. You can see that it's rotated 90 degrees in the wrong direction, and it's also rotated down. So let's go ahead and fix this. Instead of setting the world rotation, let's see if we can add relative rotation. Set relative rotation. We'll try that one. Update. Split this. Right-click, split struct pin. Plug in our rotate into the X. One more time. Hit play. Walk into our vault. The light turns on. Walk up to our chest. And it opens, but the wrong way. So let's come back in here. I believe we're rotating the wrong direction. So I'm going to go to our timeline, select the 120 node, and choose -120 instead. Compile and save one last time. Hit play. Walk into our vault, and now our chest opens correctly. Huzzah! Now we also want our chest to close, so we're going to go to our end overlap, and we're going to go ahead and plug this into reverse. Compile and save. Let's come back to our play, walk into our room, so we've turned on the light. Let's walk up to our vault. The chest opens. If we walk away, it closes. And that will happen over and over. So now all you have to do is fill up that chest with whatever you'd like to keep stored. Now, one last thing we're going to do is we're going to give our vault a door. So we're going to go ahead and minimize this. Let's make another new blueprint. Right click, let's make an actor, and let's name this BP_door. Pop that open. Now the very first thing we need is a door model. So let's go over to our starter content real quick. Go into props, and we've got SM door and SM door frame. Wonderful, we're going to go ahead and drag those in. Now we've got our door frame and our door. Let's go ahead and line up our door correctly in the door frame. There we go. Good, looks fine to me. And now we need to rotate our door. So same thing we've done previously, we're going to go ahead and add a component. We're going to look for box over here in the top left, box collision. Let's go ahead and full screen that. So now we have our door frame, our door, and our box. Now if we put our box inside of our door, let's look at our hierarchy real quick. The box will swing open whenever the door does. And if we do that, things are going to get messy. So we need to make sure that our box is not in our door, but in our door frame. Then we're going to adjust the size of our box. Let's go ahead and, can we select it? Thank you. Make it a little bigger, make it a little wider. Let's make it pretty big. We want to account for the distance of the swinging door. Let's see if that's good enough. We'll rotate our door 90 degrees. Yes, that should be fine. Alright, so now we've got a box and our door. Let's move the trigger up so that it doesn't clip through the floor. There we go. Now, one more time, go to our event graph. Delete the default events. Right-click our box, add event, on component begin overlap, on component end overlap. Now we want to make sure that the door can open, so we'll add in a timeline. There we go. Pop that open, add a track, add a float track, name this rotate, right click, add some keys, change the length of our timeline. Let's go to 1 second. Let's make the door open kind of fast. Our first value needs to be at 0, 0, and our last value needs to be at 190. Compile and save. Come back to our event graph. Grab our SM door. Set relative rotation. Based on our rotation, let's go ahead and split the structure pin. Now we're not rotating in the X direction. This time we're rotating in the Z direction. So we'll go ahead and plug this in here. We're going to go ahead and plug this up there. And then we're going to go ahead and compile and save and see if this door works. We'll drag these out of the way. Come back to Content, Assets, My Imports. Look for our BP door. Drag the door in. Let's line it up with the wall. Make sure that it's lined up properly. Oh, it's a little bit too thin to fit inside there, so just the width, just a bit. There we go. Let's hit play and find out. I walk up to the door, and it swings open. I walk into the room, the light turns on. I walk up to the chest opens. I walk away from the chest closes. I walk away from the light turns off. I walk away from the door, and we forgot to close the door behind us. So let's come back to our blueprint, plug in the end overlap, reverse, compile, save, hit play one final time, walk up to the door opens, walk away from the door closes. Hooray. Now, there is one little tricky thing to note, which is I can actually walk through the door, even though it doesn't open and close. That's because the door doesn't have collision by default. If you want to go ahead and fix that, all you have to do is come back to the viewport, click the door, click this little Browse to SM door to open it up in your content browser, double click it, and add in some collision. So we're going to go up to collision, add a box, and now there's collision on our door. Save, and now we can't walk through that door anymore. Let's go ahead and open it up and try walking through it, and you can see that I now bump into it as if it were a real door. Hooray! Now we've got a door. Let's also go ahead and copy that door over to our main entrance. Content assets, my imports door. Rotate it around 90 degrees and stick it in our door frame. Oh, again, need to make it just a shred wider, huh? There we go. So now our house has a door. And we can go ahead and walk on down the stairs and leave our house. Hooray! Now that does conclude this module, but we do encourage you to do your own research either on the Unreal documentation or even things like YouTube or the Unreal Marketplace to find something creative you can do with blueprints, and maybe you can explore that for Project 3. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next module.